Do you like playing long games? Good, because today we are talking about a powerful iteration of one of Pokemon's classic archetypes, Stall. More specifically, Fossil Stall, all centered around Wailord EX. He a big boy. 200 HP on a stage 1 Pokemon is already daunting when it's sitting across the field from you, and that's without knowing the effect of Super Deep Dive. For one colorless energy, Wailord can heal 30 damage off of itself and then retreat to the bench. Super high HP and good luck making any damage stick to this thing. Of course, when you deep dive, you're going to be switching a fossil into the active position. The EX era actually has fossils with 40 HP, meaning that not all attacks are going to automatically knock them out. It's not the same as Mysterious Fossil, which only had 10 HP, where, yeah, your opponent just hits it, they knock it out, they don't get a prize card, but whatever, they cleared the active position. No, with Root Fossil and Claw Fossil, you're forcing your opponent to attack multiple times into this target that is not going to yield them a prize card. Regardless of the fossil you move into the active position, you're buying yourself at least one turn off of that attack. During that turn off, you're going to be healing Wailord for even more. Utilizing Bellosom's Heal Dance, once during your turn you can heal 2 damage counters off of one of your Pokemon. So during the time that Wailord moves from the active position onto the bench, before it can ever move back in, you've already healed yourself of 50 damage. And this is a repeatable cycle that really only requires one energy to initiate, and from there it's just a matter of drawing into the cards you need in order to keep a steady supply of fossils on the bench. Wailord EX does have 2 weaknesses, but they are 2 types that don't have a ton of presence in the metagame. Yeah, Wailord has a retreat cost of 5, but it doesn't matter because its 1 energy attack allows it to retreat. You do have Dwindling Wave as an attack option, but you're not really going to be closing out any games with Dwindling Wave. Instead, you're just going to be decking your opponent out because your opponent is going to have to invest so many resources into knocking out a single Wailord that they're going to be churning through their deck, because the format does have a lot of big threats that can KO a Wailord eventually. Looking at like Blaziken and Rayquazas. Even Groudon can stack damage a little too quickly for Wailord EX to keep up with. The issue is, like I said, it eats through your deck so quickly just trying to build up enough damage to get rid of one of these things, and then you just have 3 in the deck. I don't know what they were thinking whenever they designed this card, but I love and hate this Wailord. Of particular note, this is one of the few deck lists you will see on this channel from 2004 that does not have Dunsparce. The deck doesn't really need them, though it does help out a little bit. It can't search out those Root Fossils and Claw Fossils, so it's excluded from the list. What we do have is 4 copies of Wailmer, which has 80 HP in its own right. Just starting the game with an 80 HP Wailmer is just going to make your opponent sigh. I don't think it really matters which Wailmer you pick. There are several available, but they'll have 80 HP. They're not going to be attacking for 1 energy. And what you're looking to do is just attach 1 energy to a Wailmer and then evolve it next turn anyway. On top of those 4 fat Wailmer, we got the enormous Wailord EX. 3 copies of those. We've already gone over what the main strategy is here. For the choice of Oddish, I've gone with the Hidden Legends Oddish, 50 HP, 1 energy attack. A lot of times you will have to start the game with an Oddish, and it's not too bad of a choice, though you will want to search out your Wailmers and get those into the active position as quickly as possible. For the Glooms, I've gone with the one from Aquapolis. Its Pokebody can reduce resistances on Pokemon, which is a bit unique, but it's not going to be relevant most of the time. But it does have an attack for 2 colorless energy, so you can still slap 2 water energy on here and use Gloom's attack against your opponent's Pokemon that is weak to grass. And that is something that will be relevant sometimes, because a huge chunk of this format, including this deck, is weak to grass. On top of those Glooms, we got 2 copies of Bellosom from Hidden Legends. This is the Heal Dance Blossom that we talked about earlier, and it's going to assist in keeping your Wailords healthy. Healing off 2 damage counters every single turn. Unfortunately, this does not stack. Well, fortunately for your opponent, it does not stack. Otherwise, this deck would be nigh unbeatable. But this is another one that you can just stack energy on and attack with if you're up against another deck. that is weak to grass. And we do have a couple of copies of multi-energy in this deck just so you can meet the energy requirement off of Blaziken. In addition to that core setup, I also have one copy of Vileplume from Expedition. Vileplume can just be a nasty card to include in this deck because of its poison, pollen, poke power. Once during your turn, you can flip a coin. If heads, the defending Pokemon is now poisoned. So while you're sitting on your side of the field, you're stalling, you're deep diving back to the bench, throwing a fossil in the active position. Just putting poison on your opponent's active can make them waste even more resources in their deck because they don't want to just strand something out in the active position that's going to slowly die over time, especially if it's one of their main attackers that they're trying to keep powered up and healthy in order to eventually knock out a Wailord EX. Again, this has a pretty decent attack that you can whip out against grass weak Pokemon. Petal Dance. It only costs 2 energy and you flip 3 coins. It does 30 damage times the number of heads, so potentially looking at anywhere from 0 to 90 damage for 2 energy. Put weakness on top of that, you got something that is a threat. We do have a lot of cards in the trainer base that technically count as Pokemon. Right at the top here, we've got the 4 copies of Root Fossil, the 4 copies of Claw Fossil, and then a couple copies of Mysterious Fossil just to keep the party going with a couple of those classic 10 HPs. As I mentioned earlier, Dunsparce can't search out these key basic Pokemon in quotations here. So instead you're going to be relying on a lot of draw power to just get those fossils into your hand straight onto your bench so that you can continuously stall out with Wailord EX and Super Deep Dive. That draw power is going to consist of 3 copies of Copycat, 3 copies of Steven's Advice, and then down here at the bottom I got 2 copies of Professor Oak's Research. To help smooth out those draws a little bit too, I got 3 copies of Oracle in here. A lot of times Oracle is just going to be go grab a Steven's Advice and put it on top of your deck, so the next turn you're drawing into a card that's just going to draw you into a bunch more cards. It is going to be more important for this deck to search out evolution cards just so you're not having to rely fully on draw power, because a lot of decks in the 2004 format are used to having Dunsparce to grab all your basics, and that's thinning out your deck quite a bit, so the odds of drawing into your necessary evolution cards is higher. Not so much for this deck. So Professor Elm's training method is going to let you search out your Glooms, your Blossoms, your Vileplumes, and most importantly, your Wailord EXs. Any opponent that has played against a Wailord EX deck knows that the key to winning is not to try to knock out the Wailord EX. The key to winning is stranding a Blossom or a Vileplume in the active position and then just slowly either sniping the Wailord on the bench or doing a whole bunch of spread damage, anything that keeps Wailord EX from using Super Deep Dive. So for those scenarios where they've stranded a Blossom in the active position, I got a couple copies of Switch in here just in case. And then for the stadium slots, I have 2 copies of Mystery Zone. Mystery Zone is one of these weirdly worded cards that didn't see a ton of play, and it has a huge text box to just say, hey, show your opponent an evolution card in your hand, then swap that evolution card in your hand with an energy card from your deck. So if you've got an extra Gloom in your hand that you're not really going to be using, you flash that to your opponent, you go search out a water energy. And then later in the game, if you need that Gloom again, it's going to be in your deck. Mystery Zone just adds a little bit of consistency through a little bit of cycling for your hand. Also have 1 copy of Island Cave, which is going to serve as another refresher for Wailord EX. If it gets a special condition placed on it that is making it so that you can attack or that you're going to be racking up poison damage, you can just play Island Cave, attach a water energy from your hand, and that Wailord EX is good to go. So pretty heavy on the trainers over here, although a lot of those are technically Pokemon that you're just going to have as bodies on your bench. Over on the energy side, I got 3 copies of multi-energy just so you can attack with those Vileplume, with those Blossom, and actually get a little bit of damage on your opponent if you're playing against something that's just straight up weak to grass and early game you see that path to victory. Sometimes you're just going to power up a Vileplume and go to town on your opponent. You'll still have the Wailord EX stall tactics in your back pocket, but if you can just get some key knockouts early game, you're going to set your opponent back even more, force them to use even more resources to get that setup back from the ground up, and by the time they've done that, they've probably decked themselves about halfway, and the Wailord EX on your bench is going to be smiling even bigger at them. And then to round out the deck, we got the 12 water energy, which are just going to be used for your Wailord to super deep dive over and over again. Dwindling Wave will come up periodically, but it's not a key aspect of the deck. Instead, you're really just looking at stalling with Wailord EX and then attacking with Bellossom and Vileplume when the need arises. This particular build that we just went over is designed with Blaziken in mind, meaning that in that particular matchup, you are wanting to use Dwindling Wave, which is a 4 energy attack. So as you're stalling, you are trying to keep Wailord EX as healthy as possible so that when you get that 4th energy attached and you're attacking into a Blaziken or a Blaziken EX, that you're dealing maximum damage. I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that this particular build is full stall. The intent is that you will be stalling a lot of the early game, but the late game does include a lot of attacking. As your opponent is out of resources, they're already on the back foot, you're going to be coming in with these high energy, high damage attacks that are going to be able to wipe them out. If you were wanting to go full stall, just include copies of Pokemon Nurse and Potion to make all of your opponent's attacks absolutely futile, and at least a couple copies of Town Volunteers just to make sure that you're not decking out faster than your opponent. On the flip side, if you are looking for more knockouts, ATM Rock may be a safer bet in the late game than having to rely on Dwindling Wave or even one of your grass attackers. So what do you think? Top tier deck or bottom tier garbage? Have you ever had to play against Wailord EX? Let me know down in the comments, and if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, go check out any of the other videos I like. Do all the YouTube stuff to help me out, like, subscribe, tell a friend, and let me know what type of Pokemon TCG content you would like to see on the channel in the future. Have a wonderful day, I'll see you next video.